Hi, Jegaysus.
Hello, heathens.
Hi, friends.
How's that banhammer treating you?
That band hammer, it swings. It swings hard. No,
I understand.
So here's what cracks me up. I decided to be snarky with one comment where someone said, "What the fuck is a fuck field?" And I made like 3 videos where I'm pretty sure I said "fuck" in each video 42 times, something like that.
It's the best.
Did you like them? I had fun. It was.
I
really...
sent it to my friend, and she's like,
"How dare you?"
Fucking content.
Well, it's just like I thought it'd be, and like I'm low key teaching like ecology and like supply chain and economic theory, and a couple of people picked up on that, but those didn't get me banned. Not a single fuck got me banned. What got me banned was an old video that I made about Lilith. That apparently that one is now getting banned for nudity. This is like a trend.
Why do they all hate Lilith so much?
Did that one also have a statue with a nipple?
That might have had a nipple statue. There might have been a stone areola.
Areola.
Which should be a ska band.
A lone areola.
Hello, everyone. I'm so glad you're here with the stone areolas.
We're changing the name of the podcast, actually.
Stone Areola Podcast. All right, well, outside of being banned for nothing, how's everyone's week going?
It's not bad. It's pretty good. I've had a pretty good work week.
Meh.
Jegaysus?
Meh. Like I said, I'm just like in constant struggle with my English professor, and I hate it because I don't know. I don't know if you've ever had like that teacher that's just like way too proud of themselves. I think that's what we have going on. He is a grammar enforcer. I'm not going to say the other word, but more importantly, like that's fine. It's English. I get it. But the first assignment paper or whatever came back, and I got like a D for the first time in my life going back to college. Because like usually I'm in between 95 and like 105% in my classes. That's the kind of student I am. But no, a D. And literally in his email that he sent out to everyone, he said 80% of the class got 64% or under. And I got 67%. Like I'm like, if 80% of your class is getting 64 or under, don't you think you're the problem?
I want to pitch a TV show to MTV. Or do they still do TV shows? I would like to pitch a show.
Sometimes.
Where teachers that grade on those scales need to get in the ring with master students who just want to fight them. If they lose, they have to get lectured on how to teach. Like here's how teaching works. You know, you're actually supposed to help people succeed. You're not supposed to try to like instill the weirdness of what your father does.
Oh God, yeah, that's the weirdest thing about teachers that do that to me. It's like, you know, the idea of teaching is to teach and to help people succeed, not to like lord your superiority over them and like.
That's what it is. It's a narcissistic complex. Like, I am so good at teaching that no one can pass my class because my curriculum is just a little too advanced.
At all, but like, are you at a community college?
I am.
Yeah, okay, that makes it even more annoying to me.
It's transferable, so like that's his excuse for it. He's like, if this was at USC, you would all be failing. So I like to grade on USC standards because this is a transferable credit, so it should be held to the same standard.
Also, those teachers are always lying.
But
they're always lying. The teachers that actually got that job are actually really enjoyable. And people want to take their courses.
I had the same course with different curriculum and a different teacher, but I couldn't continue it because I overwhelmed myself with like four courses, and I had to cut back to 2. And she was nothing like this. And I was there for like 3 weeks, and she was great. I'm like, I should have stuck it out with her because this guy's a monster.
So
anyway,
I had that exact kind of experience in seminary where like I took Greek and then I took Hebrew. And I was like, and I always got to say, I was like, all right, I'm doing well with these ancient languages on a master's level. Cool. The undergrad right across the street was grading things at twice as fast and twice as hard as the masters. Like students were like wanting to know Greek, and they were getting graded at twice the scale of the people in the masters who would be using these for like legit papers. It was it made no sense, but it was just because a teacher wanted to flex and always like wrote papers for like conferences in Greek, and it was just obnoxious.
That is obnoxious. Well, on that note, circling back, last week we talked about religion and empire and how religious rhetoric has come to be used as a tool of empire to kind of defend itself or to entrench its power. And I believe that we were going to move on this week to sort of the more salient points of how it's been done, and especially how it's been done in like Western culture.
Yeah, because last week we stopped pretty firmly on the Roman Empire. We stopped when Rome really hit the scene, and we went through all these different empires that had been making use of rhetoric from like the Mesopotamian and the Egyptian and the Greek, of course, and like how all of them through classism and economics made use of religious rhetoric or spiritual rhetoric. But we stopped firmly at the turn of the Christian era, right there at the turn of the CE.
And we could just stop there for now and go home. Yep, there was no such thing as a Christian era or takeover, and let's just rewind time and
there we go.
Nothing at all has happened since then, and that's the end. See you guys next time.
There is no evidence that we have a Christian tone to the world, except that the year is 2021 years after the birth of Jesus. It's always Jesus plus 1, Jesus plus 2, Jesus plus 3 every year.
Which is so bizarre to me, like, the further away I get from religion, where I'm just like, we're really out here just basing our entire everything on some guy that lived and died a couple thousand years ago. And I mean, I know to different people he means different things, but considering the fact that we're not even meant to be a Christian nation, let alone a Christian world, it's very bizarre to me that this is what we base it on. And I know it's like been changing, and we're doing like, you know.
But isn't the argument it's also not that? Because if year 0 started around his birth, it's not technically after death. So it's more like it's been a convenient tool that's been changed by the empire to fit the narrative that we base it around Christ, when in reality it's nothing of the sort.
There's this really strange, not just the conversion of other people groups, but also the conversion internally of society, of just going like, how can we make it more Jesus-y to placate to the Jesus-y people, so that we can continue to make use of their religion, and not in a straight line.
I feel like that's what Constantine did.
Exactly.
Constantine started on the Mithras side and was like, how do I bring in all these Christians?
Honestly, if people know D&D, they can understand exactly what Constantine was thinking, because he was sitting there going, crap, I need to win this war, but I don't have a healer on my team. If only I had a healer. I hear Yahweh's a pretty good healer, and there's this Jesus guy. What if we just put his symbol on all the shields so they have an extra healing buff, you know? And then we might win this war. Like, it's really weird. Yeah. He would have been a great, player, but he took it too seriously.
I mean, I guess it doesn't strike me as that weird, considering what they believed back then. I mean, it was a very, I don't want to say primitive, but it was just a very different understanding of the world, where it was like, we don't have science in the same way that we have it today, or even 100 years ago, or 200 years ago, or 1,000 years ago. And so everything needed some kind of explanation, and if somebody caught something and then got better, they didn't have a scientific explanation for it, so it had to be God, or gods, or a specific god.
The cross on the shield was obviously the reason.
Yeah, exactly. or some kind of ritual. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, rituals, sigils, even if they weren't called sigils at the time, like those type of things are very prominent, and you can still see those in a lot of the relics and things that we find today. I mean, we touched on that last week, how like even in caves where, there's animal carvings or whatever, and they were very much representative of their belief or their spell casting or whatever, for the new season, for the new, harvest, whatever you want to call it. But I do also find it interesting, just getting back to the, in the year of our Lord, Beyonce Knowles. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I was not prepared.
But, yes, it makes it more Jesus-y for the Jesus people. And I think that we think about this with our modern minds, and we're like, okay, well, the Jesus-y people, they're kind of in, I don't know if they're in the minority now, but more, like the devout Christians would be a bit more in the sort of minority than your everyday person.
Yeah.
But back then, it was, Christianity was it. That's all. The end, full stop. I mean, if you lived in this area.
Fair. But I think what's really weird, you said devout Jesus people. I think what's really concerning when we think about government and religion is that we have a lot of nationalist religious magicians, where they don't actually believe in any kind of like power other than they're going to go to heaven. They're not really united in any kind of like tie to a religion. They're tied more deeply to like pledging propaganda, pledging themselves to the allegiance to the flag, voting in the right direction, taking off your
abortion
hat, abortion rights, and then like weird magic rituals. Like, here's how you know the prayer gets a 1-up. If you take your hat off. That's such a fascinating ritual. Like I'll take my hat off when we pray, or that's a Southern thing. Maybe that's not a thing.
I was gonna say I've never heard of that.
We also do it. I mean, I don't do it, but some people will do it for like a national anthem or whatever as a sign of respect. So
I was gonna say I know not to go into a church with a hat on.
Yeah,
that was always taught to me.
It's so bizarre to me that we've somehow conflated like God's gonna find us disrespectful if I have a baseball hat on,
but not me living on stolen land. That's fine.
Right. Like, and also,
it used to be like that for everything, though. Any building you entered, no hat. Any time you're talking to a woman, no hat.
That can continue. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, but that's part of it.
I gotta see the hairline. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, please show me what you have under that hat, sir, before we continue. Not shaming anyone who's bald. There's some very hot bald people.
That's very true. I mean, look at The Rock.
We just have a direct problem with you hiding the fact that we don't have a problem with balding. We have a problem with deception.
Aaron Goldie boy.
Yeah, I mean, also I just can never miss a chance to make a joke. But yeah, okay. If you're bald, I still love you. I love you.
Just not in that way.
Maybe I've dated bald people.
I have never dated a bald person. That is something I have not done.
Well,
Me neither.
Sorry, I was going to say you can, but you can't because you're married. So
yeah, no, we're not.
Yeah, don't do that. Yeah, don't do that.
Also, like, even if we weren't, I'm busy, so I don't even.
I'm booked and busy.
Like, who has time? Okay, so what are we talking about? Okay.
Sorry, let's get back on track.
So we've exited the time of Antiochus Epiphanes and all of the intertestamental period, and we've firmly entered into the world of Rome and its capacity to where empire and this new religion are interacting in a really complicated way. What I find particularly interesting about this entire thing, and this is just proof how pervasive empire is at taking any tool and making it useful. Christianity is such an anti-imperial religion at its core, and the fact that it was able to be used, like proto-Orthodox, like early Christianity, was able to be used as a tool for the empire. Exiting seminary, I just kind of sit here and go, this is wackadoo batshit bonkers. Like, I have no idea how they pulled this off. Greatest scheme ever. Like, Ocean's 14 quality of a plot. Like, I don't know how they pulled it off. Well, I kind of actually do know. That was my master's. But it's still weird. Like, even knowing the stuff that I do, it's just like, how in the hell did an empire look at this religion that actively called their savior the name that was reserved exclusively for Caesar, that actively called the way that they spread the news the same way that the heralds of Caesar were called, the Evangelion? Like, how did they take all of this anti-imperial stuff and go, that's ours?
Slowly.
It's just fascinating. And for those listening in, a great like resource for like observing the pattern of how Christianity and imperial structures have interacted over time is there's this guy named Rieger, who wrote a book called Christ and Empire, and it walks you through every era, going all the way up through like the colonial era and the Second Great Awakening. So like all the way up through the 1830s, on like how Christianity has interacted both in affirming empire and opposing it over time. It's pretty interesting.
I have always found it fascinating how this, I'm just echoing what you were saying, but how this religion, I mean, even ancient Judaism, its entire base is rooted in this hope for a future where they will be vindicated and victorious, but it's consistently calling out the evils and corruptions and greed and sinfulness and wickedness of the current world, but also the current administrations. I mean, they were called different things back then, but the people in power, right? And how one day they would be victorious over these people in power because they were wicked, basically. And then you see that obviously bleed through into Christianity because Revelation here, like its entire premise is telling Christians to stay strong. There's hope like they will be victorious over this current government, administration, empire, whatever, and not to pledge allegiance to this empire. And so like the entire Bible, if you can somehow manage to strip your mind of everything you've been told about it, is very anti-imperialist and very it's I'm trying to think of the word, but it's certainly meant to be subversive. And instead, we now read it with this like weird understanding of it affirming people like Donald Trump. Like,
I was gonna say, how much of that though is very anti-imperialistic towards outside controlling, I would say, nations. Like if you think back to like the Old Testament and Judea, most of that was written about people who are coming in and conquering them, right? So of course you're going to have that anti-imperial feel. But as soon as there's like an established kingdom of Israel and they have their own monarchy, that vibe very much goes away. It's fine as long as they are in control and they have the power, right? Because then it's just confirming the in-group of like, we should be in control and the Messiah will be a king of all nations. So when you get into America and they look up and say, look, we do have a president that is Donald Trump, and this is what we've been waiting for, they then change from that persecution complex into this is our savior complex.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I want to add a layer to it, though, and talk about the nature of how prophets interacted with empire, or interacted with Israel, because it was originally called the Book of the 12, because there were like 12 prophets. And what's really interesting about them is the way that they give us snippets into the conflicts of the early, like, Jewish world. At least, both before Babylon attacked, during the Babylonian exile, and after. Because they have all this rhetoric about how there are people who, I forget which one it is, but there's one prophet who says we need to take all the fat people and hang them on meat hooks. And uses like this really aggressive imagery, and that's exactly how it's said. I'm quoting the scripture. That makes you uncomfortable, I understand. But and at first you're just like, wow.
I guess you're just gonna have to string me up, bud.
Okay, Miss CrossFit.
I'm joking.
Okay.
This is
no. But here's why. I gotta finish that.
Like,
otherwise, it's gonna get really weird. I gotta finish what that was, because otherwise, it's gonna be really weird. The reason he said that, he was basically saying like, if they want to eat like cattle, string them up like cattle, especially since they're leaving people starving in the streets. And so it was a critique of the empire, even
having a lot.
Yeah, basically going like if they're going to eat like cows, we're going to string them up like one. That was the rhetoric he was using, which is really aggressive. And we forget, like, that's like a roast or a Def Jam comedy session in aggression with how aggressive some of these prophets were. But when we get to Amos, and this is pretty interesting, Amos refuses to call himself a prophet or the son of a prophet, because the prophets have at that point in Jewish history become these like royal viziers that just say whatever the king wants.
Interesting.
They like the prophets will say, "You will be glorious today." Like he criticizes them in that way, and very similar, almost parallel to how we think about these pastors that stood around Donald Trump and put their hand on him and blessed him. It's very similar, where we're like, it's a pretty fun parallel for me now that I think about it, because he refused to call himself a prophet the same way that many people that value Christ have stopped calling themselves Christians, because they've seen what the people that are called that are willing to do to partner with evil.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I stepped all over your words, but I just wanted to not end on a put fat people on meat hooks line, because don't tweet that, and I just wanted to make sure that wasn't the last thing that was said.
No, I was just going off on a tangent of like, it has nothing to do with anything, just wondering what the body types were even like back then. Not that anyone would necessarily know, but like, I understand that that's not actually, I mean, it is what they meant and it's not what they meant, but mostly it was just my brain shooting off in a unnecessary direction.
If you want to know what it was like, there's this fascinating book called Life in Year One by a guy named Scott Korb, and he's essentially a reporter, and what he did is he did a deep dive into like the dietary habits and everything else, all the way down to the point where he puts in his book in first century, his idea is like, what is first century Palestine like? Not as a religious text, but just as an idea. There are chapters about like what the most common smells would be in the marketplace. He gets that precise. Like he paints like a whole world based on what we do know about the first century world. It's a beautiful book. Life in Year One, Scott Korb.
Okay. Noted.
So
got people on hook.
Relating that back to empire, specifically, where does, I don't know how to phrase it, but specifically, when does religion become a tool of the empire? Say Roman, specifically, since that's where we're at. When do they come in and say this will become the national, uber-national religion to unite all these different countries and territories that they're ceding?
That's complicated. I'll let other people go first because I have some things to say about that. But
other people, I mean, I honestly.
Well, there's two of you. I'm not going to say.
Let's go find someone. Hurry.
Hold on.
We're now going to go out to the audience. All right. What's your name?
Yeah.
Where are you from? Nevada. Glorious.
So, I mean, I don't know the exact moment. I think Andrew will have a lot of perspective on that. I mean, I think we all knew this was going to be an Andrew-heavy episode, and that's okay with me.
Okay. Well,
why?
that's very
it's not
kind.
Bad.
I feel bad sometimes. I don't know.
Okay, stop. Did that work? Are you cured? Stop.
Yeah, it was perfect. It worked
Great.
with my that's how I handled my anxiety too.
Thanks, I'm cured.
Have you considered not?
Have you considered? Don't worry about it. All right, great, I won't. Okay, anyway, sorry. So I think a lot of it does have to do with Constantine, but I don't necessarily think that's the turning point. I think there had to be, he didn't just wake up one day and decide that this was going to be the thing that he united people under. But I'm not sure that my Roman history is strong enough to say exactly what happened. So Jegaysus, if you have thoughts, or Andrew, if you want to take it away.
I have thoughts, but they're probably not always the correct perspective. I do definitely see what you're saying in terms of how it wasn't maybe a one decision, right? Where he's just waking up one day, but it's kind of like that because of his vision that he had, where he all of a sudden came to the realization that Jesus Christ was going to help him win the battle when crossing X river. I can't remember the name of it to save my life. But I was watching this really interesting YouTube feature where they go to Constantine's arch and they have the entire battle depicted on the arch in motifs and inscribed. And it's something that they've barred off from people. So even though it's almost like the Arc de Triomphe and in the center of town, you can't approach it. You can't get close to it. So they get permission to go up and look at each of the scenes and see how that fits into the entire Constantine battle story and how he came to power. And it doesn't match the stories that were written about him. So there's two pieces of evidence, I believe, two separate stories that were written, one a couple weeks after the battle and 1 year after the battle, which in and of themselves already start to differ with how the dream came to him and the whole cross on the shield thing. And yet the very scenes that they decided to carve into stone about how he came to power just a year later don't have a single cross anywhere in the scenes. There's no person who put their life down to sacrifice themselves to allow Constantine to continue the battle. There's just different things from these letters that did not happen.
Interesting.
So they're when did this come into play? It wasn't at that battle. It's something that's been used probably up to a decade later to explain how he got into power. But that was more so probably trying to do lip service to the Christians that are now in the empire, being yeah, I became a Christian too 5 years ago.
Yeah, it's revisionist history.
It's revisionist history in real time. So I think that's interesting, but I don't know enough about the subject to go into it super fully.
There we go. Sorry. So I heard everything. Jessica, it was a great idea to do a live while doing this because I can see... I could see everything. It was a bad idea to set my phone on the computer because I turned off my computer briefly, and that's why my video went away. But I'm back. Sorry about that.
Is it the Rubicon, or that was a different Roman emperor?
Rubicon
River.
What are we talking?
No, that was a different.
Oh, the
I was
river.
Watching,
You're looking for the river battle.
The other weekend, I was real depressed, and so I just binge watched the Roman Empire docuseries on Netflix and didn't get off the couch. Very interesting. But now, of course, all of my Roman history information has sort of run together because all they did was fight and kill each other, it feels like.
The Battle of Milvian Bridge.
Oh, the Milvian Bridge.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh my god, it was on my birthday. Sorry.
The Battle of Milvian Bridge was on your birthday?
Yeah, so now I'm not going to forget
that. Oh, that's so cool. Yeah,
When's your birthday?
That's super dope.
So I'm Jesus and Constantine, you're welcome.
Wait, when's your birthday, Jegaysus?
October 28th.
Oh, coming up.
Coming up, yeah.
Okay, sorry. Back to Andrew.
Now, when was that battle again? Help me out. Give me
October 28th.
I just closed the page. Really?
October 28th. What year was that?
319, I think, or something.
319. Okay, that's interesting. Okay,
wait. Let me see for sure before I say that out loud.
I like how you say that, like
312,
and you're like, oh yes, 319. Yes.
312. I was wrong.
I didn't realize how early. Okay, so okay. It's
specifically
not
13 years before Nicaea. 312, Nicaea 325.
13 before Nicaea, 7 after Milan. Got it. So there's this thing called the Edict of Milan. Okay, the Edict of Milan is this really interesting moment prior to this battle, prior to all this lip service that is paid to Christianity that took place around 319. And the Edict of Milan is the legalization of Christianity alongside all these other religions of the Roman Empire. It does not set Christianity as the primary religion. That's not what it does.
Because before this, they were literally taking them into the Colosseums and then murdering Christians via sport.
Right. It's now just legal. Like, you can be Christian in public. Like, that's what's happening here.
When did it become illegal, though? Because I feel like it was fine to be a Christian, and I know that there was persecution, but I think... Okay, and you can correct me again if I'm wrong.
For those listening, Andrew's doing a happy dance.
Yeah.
I'm so excited about this, because this is such a weird history. It's so cool. And, like, this is how we get nuns, and it's happening right now. I'm so excited. Okay,
it's happening right now. So... Okay, if you all grew up in, like, evangelicalism, you probably read, like, Jesus Freaks by DC Talk, and you read, like, every book with, like, gory, bloody execution stories and, like, basically believed you were going to be flayed alive, and, like, jumped in salt. Like, that was my belief. Like, that's how I was going to go. I was under the impression for a long time that there was just, like, mass persecution of Christians in the Roman Empire that would, like, they just round them all up and take them into the Colosseum, and they'd have to, like, wrestle bears and, like, all this other stuff. From what I had been learning, yes, there were certainly some Christians that were taken into the Colosseum, but it wasn't always because they were Christian. It was because they were breaking other laws, and Romans were just there for the bloodshed.
Oh, yeah. It was UFC.
Except for, like, to the extreme, right? Like, how are you going to be in there fighting rhinos, bitch?
They had rhinos?
Like, I can't...
I would honestly... I'm not one for violence, but I would probably attend. If there were rhinos, like, coming after people, I'd be like, we have to go to that one.
Well, keep in mind, this is Rome, and Rome got to... and, like, Christianity got access to all of Rome, and that's the reason that Christianity spread so easily to the point where we have guys like Augustine of Hippo, which is in Africa. And so, like, well, that's not the only reason. That's not the exclusive reason, but you see what I'm saying. It's pretty neat.
Wait, so you were really excited to answer this question when Christianity became illegal. Let's circle back to this, because now I'm really interested.
Originally, Christians were being brought up on, like, arson charges, which is really interesting. Yeah.
Well, were they burning things?
No, so they weren't. Well, no. It was when Nero was the emperor, and people thought that he had, like, started that massive fire because he wanted to, like, clear space for his, I don't know, obscene sort of new building. And, like, so now I don't know if he actually did light the fire, but those were the rumors going around. And he was like, well, he wasn't super popular at the time, so we needed to find a scapegoat. And so Christians were sort of there and not particularly well liked.
Can we mention why one of the reasons he wasn't popular in Rome?
I mean, there's a lot of reasons. So we'll pick your favorite.
Dude was gay as springtime. Like,
what?
He was flaming homosexual. And people want to go, well, Rome was really affirming. No, Rome loved pederasty.
Yeah.
Loved pederasty.
Yeah.
Nero fell in love with this dude named Sporus. And we know who Sporus is, and we know what the dude looks like. We know what the arch of his nose looked like, because Nero was in love. We have busts of this guy.
Because Nero was always looking down on it?
Oh, yeah, no, like, Sporus was a bottom, Nero was a top. Like, you can tell from all, like, the dynamics of the artwork. Or maybe it was just overcompensating and it was the complete reverse. I don't know. But Nero was a flaming homosexual, and he was in love with Sporus, and even though Sporus aged out of the pederasty program, it wasn't a program, I just like to call it that, he was still madly in love with the dude.
For the people that don't know, I mean, I assume most people know what pederasty is, but like in the Roman Empire, it was totally fine for dudes to have sex with other dudes so long as one of two things was true. They either were slaves and therefore couldn't be Roman citizens, or they were underage and not Roman citizens yet. And that didn't matter. It didn't matter then. It was like, yeah, do whatever you want. Because also young boys were seen as more feminine and therefore less important.
Nero did, now I'm not going to paint him as some kind of like gay hero, he did play into the need to preserve an effeminate partner. Before he married Sporus, he had Sporus castrated.
I was going to say, is this where we get castration and eunuchs from in terms of like trying to keep these men young?
That was definitely... So we see Nero carrying this out as a continuation of this culture. He's not the one that started it. We have, within 10 years, 15 years of this, the writing of Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch. And actually, probably around the same time as this, we have the earliest writings of Jesus talking about, or words given to Jesus talking about eunuchs from birth. Yeah. So this is already an established culture. We just see him playing into this idea that to have, which actually...
Okay, I'm kind of making connections as we're talking live, and I know that there's a large group of scholars that say that, you know, the word eunuch specifically in the Bible could be referenced more to queer culture than it can to castration.
Oh, yeah, it has to.
Now that I'm putting those back to back, though, is it because they would castrate their younger male lovers to keep them more effeminate, and therefore the word eunuch is now associated with queerness? Is that where that bridge is coming in?
That's definitely a big part of it, yes. But also, one of the things that would happen to prove that this male partner was your submissive and you were not, like, breaking machismo is having the castration of the bottom. Having castration of the one you penetrate. So that you are still... So these men were not gay.
So then the word born
homoerotic sex.
Eunuchs really does make sense, because...
Basically, it was you were gay.
Culture.
Wow. Yeah, you were someone. Yep.
Is such a nightmare.
That's the first person Jesus baptized was a eunuch.
Okay, but no. Just like, can you imagine being like, well, I love you, but like you have to go get your dick cut off now?
No, I cannot imagine.
Like,
that was a whole thing.
And then,
men love their dicks. I don't know if you
knew
that.
With like
that's a
fire.
thing. Yeah.
And then come back and like, whoops, we'll just like continue to be in love. Like, God.
Can you imagine a culture that has decided that the threat of a man's honor is your lover being fully intact? That is part of what is happening in this world.
I mean, yeah, I can imagine that, because like we have tons of cultures that are so incredibly honor-based that they're willing to kill their own daughters. True. So I know this is like a weird thought for men, but it's not a weird thought for women, because...
No, that makes sense, actually.
Yeah, like, women are...
I mean, and then there's circumcision.
Yeah,
which would arguably be honor-based, because it's like for continuation of tradition.
Yeah. You're not getting murdered.
That's true. No, it's not murder. Yep. It's not.
I agree.
I was just trying to tie it back to what men might have.
Oh, yeah, no. I think there's an entire
and female circumcision
had around circumcision and how that relates to just what we accept as a culture. But also there's like female genital mutilation that happens in other countries, and has nothing to do with much of anything except for just being like, we don't want you to feel
pleasure.
Good things. Mm-hmm. You're only here to bear children.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oof. Okay, so now we think that. Unfortunately,
yeah. So they made it illegal because they hated Nero. Is that where we're at?
Oh, so sorry. So the big
also, why do all the gays have to be villains?
Yeah. Well,
yeah, I mean,
come on, Nero. Literally,
Jafar,
the Antichrist is gay. Is that what you're telling me?
Jafar is gay.
Jafar is so gay. Yeah.
Jafar didn't like Jasmine. Jafar wanted Jasmine's outfit. That's what was happening there.
No,
and
there's
really,
a
he doesn't
really good documentary on specifically the vilification of Disney characters and making them gay.
The queer coding.
All of the villains are queer coded.
Because also Jafar does not say, "Get over here, girl." He says, "Tell me more about myself."
Oh.
Scar, homosexual. Ursula, homosexual, literally, because divine.
The fire that was going on in Rome was blamed on the Christians because they were being used as a scapegoat, and so then it was like they were already not popular. I didn't start the fire; they did. So that was what I was getting at. Was that a lot of the original charges were one for being like antisocial because they would gather in sort of like small groups and they wouldn't attend the ceremonies that the town or city or empire put on because they'd be required to basically give worship or glory to the colloquial gods.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the right word? Colloquial? I don't know.
The local gods.
Yeah.
I think you were thinking about.
Yeah. So anyway, that's just my original point before we were talking about circumcision and Jafar. So.
So they made it illegal to be Christian, and then they were like, "Let's illegalize it."
Unillegalize. That's exactly right. Okay,
unillegalize marijuana.
Unillegalize. Exactly. Okay, so there's this edict, the Edict of Milan, that takes place in 313. It legalizes Christianity. It makes it a religion of the empire. Now, keep in mind, this is like 12 years before the Council of Nicaea. So between this time, we have the Edict of Milan.
Wait, what year was that, you said?
313.
So it was 1 year specifically after the battle where Constantine had his Christian revelation.
Supposedly he had this huge Christian revelation.
Quote unquote.
And there was definitely things going on there, but there's no way the history is as clean as we pretend it is. So, and it's not for another like 12 years that we have the Council of Nicaea. Now, what's really fun about the Council of Nicaea is this is not the first time that Constantine shows up and has no power with Christianity, but it is definitely the time that he hates the most. Because he shows up and the Pope won't even come in the room. The Pope doesn't come to the Council of Nicaea.
When did the Pope become a thing?
I was just going to say, when is the Pope established?
Oh gosh, the first Pope. Help me out here.
Well, it doesn't have to be the first, just in general.
How did we go from having really small individualized churches, which were basically just like small home groups, to having the Pope or a Pope?
Because I knew there were like bishops and stuff, and I know because just the conversations with the bishops at Nicea, but I didn't even know there was a Pope then. But it would make sense that there was bishops, that there would be a Pope.
The first dude would have been Linus. Linus would have been around the 60s and 70s is Saint Linus. And that's the first pope after Peter. And then the guy after that is Cletus, or Saint Anacletus. He is going to be right after him up through the 90s. So like when all the Christian texts are being written are when from Peter to Linus to Anacletus. That's the time periods.
But do you know how that looked when it was like, okay, Peter, you are the cornerstone of the church, and then Peter fucked off to get crucified, and then it's like.
So how does the Pope play into that? Because the picture I get of early Christianity is very much obviously one of the reasons why Nicaea was called is because you have all these competing views of bishops, and it was very regional. So why is there a central figure of the Pope if they're kind of doing their own jazz routine on their own side?
Well, it seems like keep in mind trying to come to a consensus, right? Because otherwise they're all going to split off into a million small pieces that can't do anything.
Right. Now keep in mind there's a Pope basically every 10 years in the Church's history, okay? So if the first Pope was Peter, and that ends around in the 60s, because, Peter and Paul die around the same time prior to the year 70. So 68. So if every 10 years there's a new pope, 10 or so years, how many popes are there by the time of the Council of Nicaea in the year 300 something?
A lot.
So how much church development has there been? Imagine.
Not a lot.
So think about it
not a lot of development.
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of changes that take place between this time period, and so the dude at the time would have been I think it's Sylvester actually. Sylvester the First.
Sylvester. What a weird name for a pope. It doesn't work in my mind.
Pope.
Yes,
wait, so was there ever in this early time, because they had so many competing theological ideas, was there ever multiple popes existing at a time? Who decides what the official pope?
Were.
Were there? Okay. See, that makes more sense to me. That makes sense.
Okay. So when there's the split around Byzantine, there are these moments.
Oh,
in
the
history
schism.
Yeah. So there's basically these moments in history where there are basically two popes. One of them being Anselm of Canterbury, who was the abbot of Bec during the Crusades. He was basically the second pope. He was never like acknowledged as the second pope, but he was basically the second pope. Okay. So by the time we have the Council of Nicaea, we basically have had 30 popes. We've had, which is the equivalent of having 30 presidencies with 2 terms go by, to give like a frame of reference for how long it's been since the church really started. So not unlike what we have felt in the United States, right? Yeah. Because how much has the United States developed since George Washington?
Yeah, it's like Washington to Reagan, basically.
Like an upward trajectory, but recently we've sort of started heading backwards, so hard to know.
Yeah, no, things got a little weird. Things got a little weird, that's true. But yeah, so like the 33rd Pope, St. Sylvester, did not come to the Council of Nicaea. He sent his guys to take notes.
Yeah.
Like,
he said, "Eat my ass, Constantine."
Well, yeah, Constantine was like not part of the church before that, so like rude.
Right.
Well, but Constantine wasn't a religious figure. He was a political figure. And like up until this point, they didn't want to be enmeshed with the government or empire or whatever. I mean, it probably at some point over those years, it had started to seep in, but like the underlying sort of tone of early Christianity was like, do not team up with the empire.
Right. No, there was a lot of tension. Where we see the tension break down, it happens a couple times prior to this, but the Pope right before Sylvester, Miltiades, I think is how you pronounce his name, he was the one that oversaw the Edict of Milan. He was the one that saw the end of the persecution of the Christians as this like growing religion that has been growing for like the past 300 years or 250 years.
Question. Someone asked this question, and I think it's good. What evidence do we have for Peter being the first Pope? And I think that when we say Pope, people are thinking of like the Pope in the Catholic Church, which is a very, very different notion than what they may have had back then, where it was just like the head of the faith at that time, which is somewhat the same as the Pope today, but not in the there's this scale and just like
he was a church leader as compared to like the regency of the Pope.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah, like we see Peter operating at the helm of both Rome and the Church of Antioch throughout his, I hate to call it a career because it's not really what it was, but over his time with the church, we see him operating as, the person over Paul. We see him operating as, and we always give Paul so much credit, but Peter was definitely the head honcho.
Yeah.
He was the one that oversaw the pronouncing of Matthias as the new apostle. He's the one that oversaw the funding of Paul's mission with Barnabas. I mean, he basically does all this. Think about it. The scaling of the presidents are really helpful for this, because George Washington was a general who had wooden teeth and died because of a bad medical procedure of bloodletting. Like, that's not exactly an extravagant thing like what we see today. Dude Bro wasn't exactly knocking it out of the park, but that was the first president, and I know we deify that. Do I?
He was just doing his best.
He was just doing his best. And he didn't even want to be president, and that's so fun to think about. But, so that's like George Washington. Peter was basically the same thing. I mean, he was sitting in a room of, a few hundred that turns into a few thousand that turned into less than 15 churches within his lifetime, and then was killed for it, died. His martyrdom is debated. And
really?
Yeah, it's debated.
Yes, it's debated. If you took the Bible completely out of the equation, we have very, very scant evidence that the apostles even existed, and then also that they were all martyred, like Christians like to say. We have a couple references to a couple of apostles being martyred, but for the most part, it's really hard to track the apostles through history.
Yeah. Because they're written about so far after.
It almost feels like, I know this is no historical basis or critical claim evidence, I'm just throwing it out there. I almost feel like the Christians were martyred by other Christians. because I would have murdered Paul personally.
Jesus has a vendetta. Yeah.
But more importantly, like, if you think about scripture, if you think about, like, what Jesus wanted, the last thing he wanted was a church to be established. And here comes Peter being like, let's put a church here. Like, that's not, what are you doing? That's not what Jesus wants. I would have killed him.
I don't know this for a fact.
No, it got weird.
I feel like Peter was a bit, like, I feel like it's one of those things where it was like, okay, we have, Jesus is coming back soon, guys. Like, don't worry, he's coming back soon. So we just need to keep the faith until then. And then it was like this chain of command where it's like, well, who was the last person to have actually been with Jesus or seen Jesus or, like, interacted with Jesus? Like, okay, you
and was part of the center circle. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
You were actually with him, so you have some authority. And then it just gets passed down that way. Okay, well, who was closest and last with Peter? And I mean, it sounds like kind of silly, but like that's
pass on.
I mean, that's how things were done, and that's honestly how things often are still done. But
which is why canonization is so weird to me. I'm like really stuck in like canon at the moment, and it's just really strange to me that they threw out almost every writing that had apostolic authority because they didn't like it.
Yeah. Well, and
they're like,
also,
well, this is really close to Peter, but. Where did this gospel come from? We don't know, but let's just say it was with Mark. That way it has authority. Put it in.
Well, so like...
Also, the canon was just decided on by Athanasia. Like, just randomly, it was like, these are the books, these are the Orthodox books, or the proto-Orthodox books.
He sent out a list. Yeah, he sent out a list. Like, this is, I'm going to name the books.
Well, but then, it was also, to be clear, still debated for another, like, 120 years after.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That is correct.
But it's ultimately what was finalized, the canon.
What was the first one? 395. What is that? I keep on wanting to say Augustine of Hippo, but it's not.
No, it could have been Eusebius. It could have been
the Synod of Hippo.
Oh yeah, I did a video on that recently.
What is the third word there? Synod of Hippo. Augustine, I think, but it's not.
Well,
Augustine.
I mean, Augustine was over Hippo, so that makes it. But okay, so topic at hand. Okay, so the first time we see Rome having any authority over the church is at 64 AD. Because we go from Peter, who is a direct line to Jesus Christ himself, and then the Pope right after him. Like, the Pope is Linus. Linus is a Roman Pope. He's the first Roman Pope, and he is the first Pope after Peter. And then right after him, we now have non-Jewish popes, with the exception of Evaristus, I think is how you pronounce his name, and he's a Hellenized Jew. But from that point forward, we really don't have a Jewish helm over Christianity. It's primarily Romans, a lot of Greeks, but it's just this slow slog of citizens of Rome being over the church, even as it is a persecuted religion. So there's a lot of complicated history here about what is, because we have people that are acknowledged by Rome, but the religion is illegal. So it gets really complicated with Constantine, because we paint him as this guy that just had control of Christianity. Well, here's how you know he didn't. Because at the Council of Nicaea, they decided that Arianism is a heresy, right?
Right.
You've heard this, right?
Mm-hmm.
The year before Arius dies, Constantine reinstills him as a saint.
Is that post-Nicaea or pre-Nicaea?
Post-Nicaea.
Post-Nicaea. So
post-Nicaea. So what he does is he flexes his emperor muscles after the fact and says, "Oh, really? Well, I reinstill him."
I don't know. Okay, well, I'd like to look at that more, because how much I feel like Constantine was also anti-Arius, though, right? Up until the fact that
it was a political.
I think they had another council after Nicaea while Constantine was still in the helm. They decided that Arius was actually correct, and they rocked out with Arian views for about 10 years.
I think that we should probably define Arianism for our
Yes.
audience.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, because it's not what most people think of.
Not common.
Oh gosh, I did not think about that. Crap.
Yeah. So Arius was a person. And he had specific beliefs about the divinization of Christ and when Christ became divine. And I believe he did. did not believe that Jesus was divine at birth. Is that right?
No. Arius believed he wasn't fully adoptionist, but he believed that Christ and God were two different levels of divinity, because Christ had a beginning because he had a mortal birth, whereas God is eternal. Therefore, God and Christ cannot be the same entity. He was under God, so to say.
And the Council of Nicaea, the first one, just decided that, you know, Jesus was equal to God.
Jesus was eternal, and Jesus is equal to God.
And one of the defining moments that determined that Arius was wrong is he lost a full-on knuckle-buster battle with Santa Claus.
Saint Nick punched him in the face.
That's right. Saint Nicholas punched him in the face.
Sorry, what? Come again.
Okay, so Saint Nicholas was a legit dude, and he was at the Council of Nicaea, and he was on the side of that Christ was homoousia, the same essence as God, instead of homoousia coming from the essence of God. Arius disagreed, and so Saint Nick decked his halls.
Decked his halls, bitch. Oh my God!
He did. He punched him right in the face. He came out of his seat. He came down the parlor. He jingled his bells. He decked his halls.
Well, and that's why I was kind of getting at with why I think Arius was reinstated, right? Because slowly after that, the church took this more almost Trinitarian view of Jesus was fully man and fully divine. Therefore, Arius is more correct than wrong, because he does have a beginning while also his spirit essence being eternal. He was still fully man, not fully divine, as they originally proposed. Therefore, they put back in Arius' sainthood, being oh, sorry, we took that away from you. Until Chalcedon, when they really started to nail down the definition of the Trinitarian.
Right. So some historians would suggest that the reason that we see this push for Arius to reclaim his position is because is in direct correlation with Constantine's increased authority within Christianity. Like that those went together. That Constantine had a beef with the Pope and was just like, you know what?
So before he was a guest, and now Constantine finally started making some decisions, being like, wait.
He was flexing a little. Now, what gets really interesting is that he had a grandson named Julian.
Was he 6 feet tall and super strong? Sorry.
So Julian is affectionately called Julian the Apostate because he was extremely educated in Christianity, unlike his grandfather Constantine. And he was just like, how the hell do you think that Jesus could help you win big wars? The dude's a pacifist. He's a hippie. Our gods, the Greek gods, were stronger. And that's when you see this real big divide again between Christianity and the empire, because it's just like, no. What are you talking about? So he completely diminishes Christianity, rejects Christianity as a tradition that should be held by the Roman Empire, and actually a lot of texts that talk about how the early church happened during this time period of Julian trying to understand the traditions of this church that he has now rejected to keep eyes on this church that was given imperial authority and then had it taken away.
Well, that's why there's a big camp of historians, too, though, I think, that specifically say Constantine wasn't Christian per se, because he was he's more pantheist than monotheist. And specifically, they point to, like the Mitheric cult spaces that are still held in Constantine's places of power, saying that he more than likely was putting out offerings to Mithras to help with the battle that supposedly Christ helped him with.
That's actually one of my favorite arguments for some kind of early integrity of these texts, is because dude actually believed in all the gods and didn't want to piss any of them off.
Yeah.
And that's such a fascinating, weird thing. It's just because he was a human being, right? He was this human being that was a deeply conspiratorial, deeply superstitious pantheist who also practiced magic. And so it's just...
See, but that's where I think we get to an interesting argument where I think a lot of Christian... I can't say a lot, but the most interesting theory to me is how much of Christianity has bled over from the pagan traditions surrounding it. Obviously we see that in the Old Testament with Jewish tradition, but specifically the New Testament tradition. And so many people have so firmly argued against it, saying that the text is unadulterated, like what's in it is in it. But I feel like a lot of the texts that you see that are kind of wonky, asserting different values and different things, come specifically from Constantine being a pantheist, or at least the traditions. That's where we see Easter and Christmas come in, is because of Constantine. We see a lot of this absorbing of ritual and magic into the orthodoxy that wasn't there before. So in a lot of arguments, it could be made that Constantine made the religion what it is for that reason.
I mean, it's easier to unite a bunch of disparate people if you absorb different aspects of their pre-existing belief systems.
Right.
I mean, like, that's oversimplistic, but yeah.
Because Mithras was born like December 25th, right?
I think that's
Isn't
part
that
of
the
the
thing?
myth that people really can't nail down. I think
I know. That's why I'm like always
Yeah.
confused. I'm like, is it Mithras that's why the date came?
God.
Because
I
people
only
say it's
know
Horus,
this
and it's not Horus for
because
sure.
when I was newer on this app, I made a video, just a quick video about how there are other resurrection myths, and there are some Mithras stands that are that's not right, and I was just like, bro, chill.
Mithras.
I did the same with Horus about virgin birth, and they're like, Horus crawled out of his mother's belly button. It's a totally different story.
Were you
Weird
there?
story.
Were you there? Did you see it? Jesus.
So, I gotta tell y'all, because we're talking about weird birth stories. When I finally get to post the video about Inanna, chick was crazy because, lady had a danger noodle in her hoo-ha. That
It's a danger noodle.
So she was intersex?
She had a serpent that lived inside.
I was gonna say,
What's
is that a serpent?
Danger noodle?
Okay.
That's a snake.
It's what Sporus had removed from him.
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking penis danger, penis danger.
Separate danger noodle.
Well, no. So no. Lady had a nope rope, and it was just. So the way the story goes is that there was a serpent that exited her vagina, and released the birth waters of and there's actually a lot of parallels between the Christian creation story and Inanna, and it's
also
really
known
weird.
as the reason why I am gay.
The nope rope?
The nope rope. The nope rope in the hoo-ha.
On that note,
if that's not a merch at some point, or a pin.
We can just name the episode "Nope Rope in the Hoo-Ha."
nope rope in the hoo. Yeah.
People won't know what we're talking about in it, but they'll be intrigued.
I barely know what we're talking about.
Okay.
I mean, at this point, we've touched on Jafar.
Yep.
Castration.
Yep.
Nope ropes.
Yep.
Donald Trump.
Which I wanted to get into more, both Donald Trump, but more importantly, castration.
No, I was like,
that's just an interesting topic to me, but I wanted to see how, because it was only recently stopped within the church, wasn't it? Like 100 years ago recently.
now
they still
just do it
had
at
castrated
hospital.
boy choirs for the longest time.
Oh, yeah,
I wonder how much of that
castrate.
was...
not...
Right,
Yeah.
the castrati. But how much of that was pedestry involved? Was that just continuing of choir singing, or was there actually some kind of Roman pedestry practice going on? Look to the Catholic Church
the
now,
Roman
and you would
Catholic
say,
Church,
now, I have to rethink the whole catastrophic. I can't say it.
The
Castrated
catastrophic
boy
catastrophe.
movement. The catastrophe. Yes. Thank you.
Catastrophic catastrophe.
Another good name for this episode.
So many things.
We.
Lord have mercy.
I feel like we
I
should come
feel
back
like
to that at a later date, though. Actually.
If we have a Patreon or anything like that, I think this should be a bonus episode instead of the one that's legitimately about the Empire. Real talk, because this is absolute batshit
No, I think
crazy.
this is good to keep.
It's
in.
a blast.
I think we should keep it all, but
It's
I think we
fun.
should actually do a Patreon on just literally castration. To be honest, that's
Let's
maybe
do it.
something
So
we
fun.
don't want on YouTube.
That'd be
you know?
so
Yeah, we
fun.
might not
I think
be
that
talking
Jess
about-
should lead that one.
Yeah.
I would love
So we'll
I
do an
knew
episode
you
on
would-
that
the,
maybe
the
in the
joy
future.
on your face. The
Bring me
joy
a
on your
sub-
face.
For the
Just
listeners,
kidding.
though, let's throw that out there too. Let's kind of come to a close on this topic.
Yeah,
But
sorry.
I know we
We've gone
kind of went
everywhere.
everywhere with it.
Well,
However,
I think that
comment if you have any other topics that are similarly related. See if maybe we can get a topic head
Any
to
other
deep dive on. I
winning
don't
topics?
know.
absurdity.
I just want to give people more of a way to reach out to us so that we can get some feedback. I know that we
I
haven't
really
really done
hope
that, and we're
people
5
like this.
episodes in.
I think this is a roller coaster you may never get back on, but you're going to talk about it forever.
Yeah,
So I will say this. A moment ago, we had our Queen of Heathens over here say that, she saw that she thinks it's pretty clear that, there's a compromise of religions to bring in people of different worldviews. And I think that's the exact tension that we see when a religion and an empire meet. The empire goes, how much can we adopt? How much can we put away? How much can we keep so we can make use of this religion? I mean, by the time we find fully funded churches by the empire, we also find a rebellious Christian group that forms the monastics. And that's where we get, like, nuns and stuff. It was a rebellion.
Nuns.
I was going to say, you said that at the beginning of the episode, we were going to get into how nuns came out of this, and I totally fell off of that. I'm sorry.
But isn't that dope? Like, it's just like, over and over again, we find, like, these really weird strains of Christianity that rebel against the empire. And I wanted to show you guys something that is proof of just, like, how evil things got over time. I want to show you a special Bible that I have called The Select Parts of the Holy Bible for the Use of Conversion of Inward Slaves.
Oh, I remember this book. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
heartache.
Yeah, it was made by the British West Indian. It was made for the British West Indian Islands for the Atlantic slave trade, and it holds in it less than a third of the whole Bible, and they chopped and screwed the entire codified Christian text for the purpose of introducing enough Christianity while removing all the opportunities of freedom, rebellion,
liberation.
It was all removed from the Bible.
God forbid that they read a story about how the slaves exodus out of Egypt.
Exodus out. Peace out.
They did exodus. They exited. The exodus did right out.
The exodus did it all. Okay, we are over time. I had a blast.
This was so much fun.
Yeah.
This was
we
so
know what
weird.
We're doing next week?
I was going to ask, how about we throw out what we might want to do, and we'll just kind of go off that? Or we do that off
we were going to... I think we do American Christianity.
I thought we were going to tap into that today, but we didn't get enough time to do that, so I think it would be really interesting to go into that, specifically American Christianity. Let's do it. Let's do it next week.
American Christianity.
See how we go into that.
I'm gonna
might be some Reformation things, some Whitfield in a field preaching. I think that's also where you come with like a lot of the whole fire and brimstone, frickin' hell, beat on your head people. So that's
fire and brimstone stuff. So Jegaysus, where can everyone find you?
Yeah, so I just wanted to throw out first before I put out my handle. If people want to contact us, obviously there's the YouTube comments. You can reach out to us on TikTok directly for commenting different topics you'd like to hear about, corrections. We, try to do our best to not lie to you, but if we have something we missed or said incorrectly, please let us know.
Oh, yeah.
Then send us an email. It would also probably be the best way. I don't know what the email password is, but you can reach out to Queen of Heathens.
Email password. Yeah.
Well, but we do have an email set up, so maybe people can get that. It's Unholy Trinity, not spelt like RTRINI-T, but Unholy Trinity 2021 at gmail.com. You can send us a note there. One day we might have a Patreon set up where we can just have like votes and polls and stuff, but not yet.
Ooh, that'd be fun.
But we're just trying to get our first episode out. So.
Yeah, we can just post it. If you're listening to this, you're listening to it before we've even debuted the first episode, or you're listening to it after, but we're recording it before. Anyway, you can find me on TikTok. Yeah, you can find me on TikTok. You can find me on Instagram. Jegaysus is the name on both those things. I have a Twitter if you want to. I also have a YouTube that I do not do anything with at the moment, but subscribe to me on the places. What about you?
So I am Queen of the Heathens on TikTok, and I am Queen of Heathens on Instagram. The O is a 0, but honestly, you could just go to my bio and click the little Instagram button, and that's a surefire way to get to my page. I also have a YouTube, but I don't use it at all, so we're just going to bypass that. I'm also Queen of Heathens on Twitter, and just, do it if you want.
Yeah, if you want.
So I'm Red Sage 1, so Red_Sage 1 on TikTok, on here. I don't have a Twitter yet. that I am Red Sage on YouTube, and I'm Red Sage 2 on Instagram, because some person with 1 post and 6 followers has Red Sage 1 on Instagram.
It's totally
I almost
fine.
added her today.
She added me.
Or them, I don't know their gender, sorry.
Well, this person with a fairy photo is very annoyed that they keep getting tagged in my stuff, and I think that's really great.
Tell her them to change the name.
I feel like the social pressure might do it.
There you go.
Like, I have more friends. All right, gang, well, it's been real. It's been fun.
I was just going to say it's been real. Thanks for coming for the gospel and then getting a whole bunch of Roman castration gossip.
Yeah, who doesn't want that?
And we'll talk about American Christianity next week.
Yeah, we'll be here. Hopefully you will too. Bye, love you. Bye. End scene.